On this episode of the show, I have with me Sean McCarthy. He is co-founder and CEO of BackOps, and we're going to be talking about the importance of the sales function. We're going to dive into Sean's background a little bit. He has a great background. He actually did have a sales background, and he brings a unique perspective to the founding team. We're going to ask him about that, how that's an advantage to his company, and working with the team that complements his skill sets, the benefits of not having a technical background as a founder. A couple of things we'll try to dive in there with Sean. Sean, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Before we start, can you tell everyone what you guys do over there at BackOps?
Sure. So BackOps was created really under the thesis that there were plenty of systems to catch internal tickets and assign them to humans, but that humans were still having to do the legwork there. And so what we have built is the ability to deploy AI twins in supply chain. So you can think of a AI worker that can go handle maybe that task that would normally take 10 or 20 minutes, jumping from system to system. They can deploy an AI twin and have the AI take it.
And I mean that seems like a very cool episode on its own. But obviously, we got a whole agenda to get through. Otherwise, people will be asking what happened to it. And it really is about the sales function, right? And you do come from a background that we want to just dive into and highlight before we get into the meat of the episode. And rather than me try to fumble through it, if you could just give us that snapshot. I don't do a lot of bios on the show, people know that, but I do think in this case, we need some context. So if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. So most recently before this, I was at Amazon. So I was hired there as a global sales leader in Amazon's marketplace. So I was building a team that took US based sellers and pushed them internationally. So if they've had success in the US and they wanted to go into Canada or Mexico as an example, we would help facilitate that, make sure that they were set up for success, and then also manage a team of customer success folks that continued to add products into those countries. From there, had an opportunity to go to Amazon Shipping. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Amazon Shipping is a ground service, much like UPS and FedEx. So now if you are not selling on Amazon either way, you can ship with Amazon. And so as a ground product, and I was very early there as the number 2 BD manager, helped build a lot of the internal processes, but most importantly, spent countless hours in our warehouses with our customers, really understanding their pain points and how they operated, and what were some of the headaches that they dealt with on a day-to-day. Prior to that was in telecom sales, and have really had some sort of sales all the way from even some entrepreneurial days in college. So it's kind of been in my DNA, I guess you could say, and it's just been something that I try to build on, year over year.
I will get into this, but I'm actually speaking and interviewing more founders that come from a non-technical background recently. And it's interesting because there's so much value there. And I think it's Silicon Valley, or generally the startup market, hasn't always gone that way. And I think we might be seeing a very interesting trend because there are now becoming a group of startups that are solving real tactical business problems that you need to have observed. And I guess before we dive in, there's so much here. I got 30 minutes, so I got to pick and choose what I want to ask you. But the company right now, BackOps, and I want to touch on it. You said the last job, one of the few last jobs, and you've worked Amazon sales. You specifically work for the logistics shipping side. Is the foundation of the company, BackOps, is it from what you saw? Did you come up with this idea outside of that context? I mean, where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so it is from something that I observed firsthand being in the warehouses. So one of the things, and specifically on the logistics sales side, we were an in the field designation, meaning we needed to spend a certain amount of time in the field with the customers in the warehouses, obviously understanding their pain points. Because I was so early, I got the list of potential customers. And of course, being a normal sales guy, I went for the top of the list, right? All the 9-figure sellers on Amazon. And as everything was kind of divvied out, I ended up getting even very small sellers, maybe selling 25 boxes a day as an example. What I noticed is that the same problems persisted with the 9-figure sellers and the sellers that were moving, again, 20 to 30 parcels a day. And a lot of that was, again, that it was the same issues coming in, whether that was tracking related or purchase order related or problems with a package that was like delayed or damaged. So it was the same thing in a different flavor, and that a human was still having to go resolve all of these, even on the largest customers that have a lot of these process and extra people. And so that was the initial thesis was, hey, can AI and some automation actually make a massive benefit, because it's fairly predictable of what's coming into the warehouses from an issue perspective. So it was born out of that real world. And what I did is I would pen test that, right? So being a sales guy, I would say, hey, if you didn't have to go grab all these tracking IDs from this system and put them here, is that something that you would like? Or if this automatically resolved, would that be a benefit? And they would say, yeah, of course. Is Amazon doing that? And I would just say, no, I'm just, curious, just understand. And so I think I did enough validation that this is a problem. People would have this problem, want to pay for it, before kind of taking the leap. Obviously, quitting Amazon is no small thing. And so I did want to make sure that that was the right move.
Absolutely. I love it. I think I have a small sample size, so I don't want somebody to think that I have now done extensive research into this, but I have now observed people who are identifying real challenges within a business because they worked within a business and they're bringing that to the table. And I think that's an interesting perspective, because that is opening up the pool of entrepreneurs, founders, to different groups of people versus tackling finding a technology problem that has a technology solution. But obviously there's two ways. I'm not trying to say selling anybody there's one way. I think there's multiple ways. And I think your way is obviously your way, given your background. I guess as you kind of look at your background, you had some sales component throughout your career. You decide this is a gap. This is something to take advantage of. The leap to becoming, I've run sales teams, I've led sales teams is one thing. Leading the entire perspective of a company as a CEO is a little bit different. Talk to us a little bit about that perspective of moving from, a business unit function where you're obviously very good at what you did to a CEO. And yeah, I guess we'll start from there.
Yeah. Probably any salesperson that moves into a CEO role, inherently the first thing they're going to want to do is just drive sales and hard charge sales, customer acquisition. That's all they're going to think about, because that's what they've done. You don't think about all of the other things as it relates to insurance, finance, personnel, even customer success motions that you have to get in flight, cross-sell, upsell, just a lot of these things that are not directly tied to sales. And then there's the whole gamut on top of that. When you start to go for a venture scalable outcome and you're taking in VC money, there's just a lot more that compounds on top of that. And so I think for me, a lot of that is rewiring to make sure that, yes, we want customer acquisition, but do we have the right internal infrastructure to support these customers? Are we focused on enough of the repetitive use case to where our teams can handle that and it's not delaying either implementation or adding these like long run rates? And so you have to look at it in a much different light. And then I think the second thing is, as much as I would love for my day to be spent 100% sales outbound, that becomes less and less. You're putting a lot of effort into hiring folks and growing folks and infrastructure and a lot of the administrative tasks. And so unfortunately, sales sometimes will take a back seat and you have to make a priority. And I do that where I block my calendar still to do the same thing I did as a sales rep, even as an individual contributor, where I still have time to cold outbound. And those are things that I think you can't lose, because you also need to be in the thick of it to understand, what the customers are asking for, what the objections are, and how to get through those. So as you scale and you train people to do those things, you're speaking from, the real world experience that you've had.
It's interesting because I think typically, as you're divesting the sales hat for more of the CEO hat, and, as a salesperson, you have to cultivate specific skills. Like there's certain things I think, and there's maybe stereotypes we all have, right, of salespeople. I think it's unfair because I think there's a lot of good salespeople. There's a lot of project management and expectation, a lot of that stakeholder stuff that doesn't get talked about because we see salespeople as we got to deliver, it's a results based industry. When you look at your background and you look at what you're doing now in the last couple of years and some of those intangibles that, and again, this may be talking to people that are in a function and would think, I'll never be a founder. Those intangibles, where do they sit now in terms of how they serve you day to day?
I think that's a good question. There's a few things that immediately come to mind. From traditional sales, what folks are mainly going to be, especially if you're in a BDR, AE type function, you're really generating opportunity and or closing the opportunity. Once that opportunity is closed, a lot of time it is passed to kind of no man's land, and you don't really hear about it unless, of course, it doesn't work out and there's some sort of clawback or something like that. As the CEO or in a founder role, of course, getting those opportunities is great. Maintaining those opportunities is actually more important, especially when you have a responsibility to investors and to other folks where churn and these things really matter. And so if you don't have a lot of these processes in place to support these customers, it actually is something that is a huge deal. And so I would say that's something that's not usually top of mind to that extent. But yeah.
Absolutely. I guess as you're kind of looking at, and maybe we can go back to, early days, just out of curiosity, at backups, and you're obviously partnering with people because you need skill sets to balance. You bring certain skill sets to the table. What obviously the technical skill set would be the easy call out here. You need somebody who's going to potentially help write code, unless you were rolling up your sleeves, and I'm not going to assume. But early days, how did you view this company, this startup, and the type of skills you wanted to bring in to kind of balance what you do really well versus things that you needed?
Yeah, I'm happy. And I'm happy to give you the current state because it's changed a lot. So at the time, it's a necessity, right? My co-founder was from Apple working on AI infrastructure. Having a technical co-founder at the time was really a non-negotiable for me because of the fact that we're talking about agentic infrastructure, AI, and there was really no systems to support a non-technical founder supporting these things. And that was something that I was well aware of and wanted to make sure I found somebody that could mirror, I guess, some of the other side. So we had like a really good partnership. To answer that, in today's world, it's changed a little bit. Now you have IDEs like Replit and Lovable and Bolt. Now those still are, unless you're downloading Cursor in a terminal and doing a lot of this above and beyond some of the natural language things that you can do, it's still dangerous enough to get to an MVP. Now, is it production ready to deploy to a bunch of customers? That's debatable, but it will get there. And so I think where it's going to go very, very quickly here is non-technical founders that maybe have domain expertise, as those IDEs get better to where it is production grade, and they're able to iterate at a faster speed. It puts them into a really unique position, whereas historically, you had to have the technical co-founder to get started. And I think that's why a lot of folks are talking about, the single founder billion-dollar companies that are probably going to sprout up here. Is that person a non-technical or technical founder, to be determined? But I think it, at least for the first time in history, gives the non-technical folks an advantage that they didn't have even just a year ago.
Absolutely. I guess one question to talk about. When you look at the problem you identified and obviously observed and decided that this is the company, how sure were you? Because you did have a good job at Amazon. I mean, you mentioned that you had a great, who wants to leave Amazon at any point in any function? It's a fantastic company. It's a recognizable brand. We all use it. Everyone knows who you are. To leave that and go launch a startup because you saw an opportunity, you saw a gap. I think it's sometimes very interesting when I talk to founders because it seems like they are so confident when they make that move because it's so obvious to them. And maybe this is a good question for people that sometimes think, hey, I have an idea and I'm not sure. Is it a case of, obviously you also vetted it out. You mentioned you spoke to people, you had conversations, but how confident did you feel you needed to be to go, I'm going to make this leap and I'm going to go give this a try?
It was hard. A lot of folks will say that that it was just this easy decision and they jump right in. It was a tough thing for me. As you can imagine, my wife was less than thrilled that I told her I'm leaving this stable, very well paying job at Amazon that many people would die to have, to jump into the startup world. And I think the second thing for me was, I quit Amazon at 34, I believe. So not 24, not 22, right? A lot more to lose in that sense. So it was a calculated risk, but for me, it was something that I just couldn't stop thinking about. And I looked at it as the amount of regret I would have in not trying it, and B, the pain point that I think it could solve and how it could be, frankly, like game changing for the logistics industry. And it's funny because, at the time I was still very unsure, to your point, trying to figure out if this is the right thing to do. I remember pitching VCs, telling them why this was going to be such a big opportunity and having to really articulate that. And now you have many players in the space with, across these companies, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. And so that conversation is not the same anymore, right? I think that it's changed a lot and that opportunity has kind of flourished. But to answer your question, it was something that was a tough decision and took a lot of reflecting. Looking back, I think it was definitely the right one, even on the hard days. But it wasn't something to me that was a no-brainer, I guess, would probably be the best way to put it.
Absolutely. I think that's always an interesting conversation because, when founders look back in hindsight, I think things always look a bit different. I guess with your background, you've moved into the CEO position. And I am kind of curious of this. I asked the founders that are technical this question. I just am kind of curious with you. When it came time to hire, or I don't know, I'm not going to assume, somebody to run sales, how hard was that for you? Because you probably could do it phenomenally well. We all would assume you'd be a fantastic candidate, but you can't be CEO and be a full-time salesperson. I mean, you can initially, but at some point you got to divest. When you look at that divesting, and I'm sure you've vetted and hire the right person. Do you have to teach yourself to sit on your hands? Is it a case of jump in only when needed? How do you handle that?
Yeah, you do. You have to sit on your hands. And it's different, right? We've been, as a sales leader in an organization, if one of your reps, you're working at Amazon or whatever it is, and they pitch something a little incorrectly or whatever it might be, sure, you might give them some coaching. You might also kind of let it slide. As a founder, you have ownership. That's your company, and it's a different feeling. So I think it's a combination of making sure that they're hitting the right points, but it's not going to be your version of perfection. Everybody's going to have their unique spin. And so as long as they're hitting the main points as it relates to like a demo or running a process and moving the needle, like you kind of just have to let them do it. And that was hard for me. I think one of the things is I initially wanted it pitched and closed exactly how I've done it. That's not realistic, and especially as you scale. So I think you just have to look at the core, and as long as they're identifying and moving these things through, and the majority of it's all there, even if it's not in the same manner that you're used to doing, you've got to let it go. But it is a fundamental difference being the founder versus like a manager or director at a sales company.
Absolutely. I love it. Sean, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us the journey, the story. Out of curiosity, before we wrap up, maybe last question. Is there advice you have? I mean, you've kind of gone through this. You took the leap. You've taken the learnings. You've applied it. You guys are building a super interesting product. What advice do you have if somebody's out there and maybe they're just in the sales function or they're in a non-technical function, they want to make the leap? Any advice? Any good takeaway?
Yeah, I have a few things. So as you come up with an idea, validating the idea is really important. Don't go to your friends or your family. They're going to tell you it's the best idea ever, and that's so smart. And it's probably not going to be good advice. Talk to the people that would actually buy your product, and when you talk to them, really measure the pain point that it's solving. So, is this a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 pain point, right? And you really want to be at that 7, 8, 9, 10, right? If it's a 1 or 2, it's probably not the right thing. And then from there, you need to validate if they'll pay for it, but most importantly, how much they'll pay for it before you do any of this, right? So, you identify that pain point, and you're talking to them, and you say, "Great. Well, would you pay $5,000 a month for this?" And they say, "Absolutely not. I would not pay that." Okay. Well, would you pay, 3,000? Maybe. Would you pay 1,000? Absolutely. So you should know that your 1,000 is way too cheap, right? And 3,000 is probably where you need to be priced on that. And that's a good amount of money to make a scalable business, right? And on the smaller side of that, if you're dealing with like a consumer product and it's $1 versus $20 versus $50, measuring that, like how much are they willing to pay, and really understanding and validating and making some sort of LOI or MVP to where you can get early traction there is really important. But I think what a lot of entrepreneurs do, maybe a little bit backwards, is come up with the idea, talk to some friends and family, they tell them it's the best thing ever, they jump head in, and then they go to try to sell it to a real user, and the user's like, yeah, I'm not going to pay for that. So just do your homework and diligence before you make the leap.
I love it. John, thanks for being on. Thanks for taking the time to share. If somebody does have a follow-up question, they may want to pick your brain, something similar. Is there a good way of doing that?
Yeah, my email is always open. It's probably the fastest way to get a hold of me. It's just Sean at Backops, SEAN at backops.ai. LinkedIn as well is a really good medium, but happy to always connect and share what I can.
Awesome. Sean, thank you for being on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I really enjoy hearing when other people that come from a non-technical background are building fantastic startups, solving amazing problems, leading teams. I think it's really great for people to hear these stories because I think there's a lot of opportunity. And Sean actually alluded, now with AI and the tools around AI, you can go a lot further than you thought. And he had some great insights, examples, and stories he shared with us. So share this episode with somebody else who might benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye. Goodbye.